The innovation rut can be hard to break out of. All the innovations coming from you and your competitors all start looking the same. And the only real competitive advantage, if it really is one, is when someone can get it to market faster. And even then, it's only by a month or two. So how do you break out when everyone in your industry is innovating on the same thing? I'll be right back.
This is the Killer Innovations Podcast with Phil McKinney. Keep in mind that the information and opinions expressed in this podcast are Phil's, and Phil's alone, and they don't necessarily reflect those of his past, current, or future employers. Now, here's Phil McKinney.
If you're a regular listener to the podcast, you've heard me repeat the same question over and over again. Under what assumption does your business or industry operate under? So why do I keep asking the same question? Well, the reality is that industries and businesses continue to be stuck into what I call one-dimensional innovations. What do I mean by one-dimensional innovations? These are innovations that stay on a track that the industry has been operating under for an extended period of time, and all the competitors are focused on competing on that same path of innovation. It's one-dimensional. Let me give you an example. In today's semiconductor industry, led by Intel and AMD from the standpoint of processors, this whole industry has been focused on packing more transistors into each chip, what they call Moore's Law. So how do I double the number of transistors that I can pack onto a single processor? And this has been the one-dimension innovation that this industry has been stuck on for many, many, many years. Now, there has been a breakout in the semiconductor industry, and what they've changed is rather than packing more transistors into a single processor, why not make the processor smaller and put more of them together into one package, what they would call multi-core. This addresses a number of the heat problems, and it changes the game. It changes from being on this constant, how do I pack more transistors in, and how do I change the game to solve the problems yet deliver a better processor and better performance overall. Now, another example that's not tech related would be one around paint. Now, paint you put on your walls, painting your house. The paint industry has been all about creating better paint. Easier to apply, easier to clean up, longer lasting, better to stand up to the scuffs of the kids running up and down the hallways, maybe a better color option. Everybody's been focused on improving the same characteristics. It's all about how do you get through this checklist and get the best score in the minds of the consumer so they buy your product. But in the case of the paint industry, over the last couple of years, what was the breakout? What was the one thing that changed that industry from being a one-dimensional industry to actually being multi-dimensional in the form of innovations? It came down to a new design of a paint bucket. A bucket that doesn't spill. And the companies that came up with these ideas as far as changing the overall design of the bucket have seen their sales increase 40%, 40% year on year. And the cost to develop this innovation was paid back in less than 1 year. So why is it so hard? Why is it so hard for companies to get out of this one-dimensional rut, this one-dimensional innovation rut? Well, mentally, we get stuck. We get stuck with the press who maybe write about your industry. You get stuck because customers evaluate your product the same way each time. So for instance, if you're dealing with a business to business, you're selling a product or service to another business, you may end up getting RFPs, requests for proposals, or requests for information. And they're giving you the checklist, and you have to fit your product or service into that checklist. And so therefore, the way you think about how do you innovate is how do you get a better response, or how do you get a better score on an RFP or an RFI. If you're dealing directly with consumers, or you have a press segment that writes about your industry and rank you and your competitors, the press will create the criteria. They will create a criteria that they think the consumers want or your customers want. And what you end up trying to do is innovate to get a better score on those rankings. And if it's a consumer, you're trying to predict what is it the consumer is going to go through when they're standing in front looking at your product. What is the checklist that they're going to run through? In the case of paint, it could be features. Do you have the right color? Do you have the right texture? Is it gloss or semi-gloss? How many coats am I going to have to put on? Functions such as how is it easier to clean? Do I have to clean the brush? How easy is that? Am I going to be spending an hour at the sink cleaning it, or is it clean off very easily? And the problem is how do you do these comparisons? It becomes hard to break out when you and your competitors are innovating on the exact same set of features and functions, and then what happens is you get into this death spiral. Everybody in your industry is trying to innovate on the exact same set of features and functions. And the innovation every year, in the case of maybe the paint industry, is maybe a new color, or maybe it's a new way to apply it, or an easier way to clean it up. What's missing in this is truly understanding what I call the uses. Not what it is you're trying to sell features or functions, but how does your customer actually use you and your competitors' products or services. And it's not just about the result. It's really about what I call the value chain, or the entire value chain. Everything from how the product is manufactured, packaged, shipped, sold, bought, used, stored, disposed, the entire life cycle of the product. It's not just about the end result of using your product, but it's that entire value chain. And it's really this entire value chain that needs to be considered. You need to look at really the combination of steps in the value chain. So let's take an example back to the paint can. In this case, the industry was focused on end results and the cleanup. Is it good coverage? Do I have good color? Is it easy to apply? And can I clean the brush easily? The industry was focused really on the end results and the cleanup. But there's a whole part of the value chain that was ripe for innovation. In this case, why not innovate during the set up and get ready to paint step? Why not innovate around the cleanup? And why not innovate around the storage? And in most cases, when people think about innovations, they think about only one step in the value chain, rather than looking for ways that I can come up with an idea that actually addresses multiple steps. So in the case of the paint can not only addressed set up and get ready to paint, because it had this plastic paint can was spill proof. I didn't have dribbles all over the floor. It was easy to clean up. I didn't have to worry about cleaning the lip of the can. When I sealed the can, you could put it away for storage for long periods of time. You could open up that lid and the paint would still be good. So in this case, a single idea in the form of this new plastic spill-proof buckets addressed multiple steps of the value chain and addressed the uses in each one of those steps of the value chain to really create an innovation in an area that the rest of the industry had not focused on. So, how do you break out of your one-dimensional innovation paths? Now let's face it, you have one-dimensional issues, I have one-dimensional issues, and even in my own business and my own industry. We all have it. So how do you break out of it? 1, look at and truly understand your value chain. Don't think you know your value chain. Now, if you're in a large business and you're in an area of product development, maybe you're not directly involved in the value chain, or you think you know it, but you really aren't intimate to it. Take the time. Look at and truly understand your entire value chain. Next, look for ideas that attack multiple steps in the value chain, not normally looked at. So in this case, don't get stuck on trying to solve the same portion of the value chain that everybody else is focused in on. Find a single idea, or look for ideas, or create brainstorming sessions to generate ideas that attack multiple steps in the value chain not normally looked at. For instance, the paint bucket. The other alternative is look for ideas that eliminate steps in the value chain. In this case, think of things like Walmart or Costco. In that case, they took out the steps of having middleman distributors, and they actually shipped the products directly to the stores from the manufacturers. So look for ideas that eliminate steps in the value chain. Third alternative is look for ideas that add or replace steps in the value chain that customers will value and compensate you for. So in this case, think about going grocery store shopping, and rather than you pushing the cart out to your car, have the groceries delivered to your home. So you don't have to worry about carrying them out, putting them in the trunk, go home, carrying them in. Have somebody else do that and get compensated for it. So again, the key here is look at and truly understand your value chain, and then look at three alternatives. Look for ideas that attack multiple steps in the value chain not normally looked at. Look for ideas that eliminate steps in the value chain. And 3, look for ideas that add or replace steps in the value chain that customers will value and they will compensate you for. Next, rank the ideas that you come out of this against your customers' unspoken needs. If they're spoken, you know about them, your competitors know about them. What you're trying to do is you're trying to understand what problems your customers are having with relation to the value chain. They may not even realize it is a problem. So you need to be able to go in and understand the unspoken needs. In this case, in the paint bucket, is spilling a problem during the setup. When you pour the bucket, paint from the bucket into your pan to start painting, is that a problem? How about opening and closing a paint can multiple times? Where the paint dries up on the lid and you have a hard time pouring it off. What about the usability of the paint after it's been stored for a while? These were all unspoken needs. They had, users had never thought about them as problems. They had just come to accept them because it's the way that they've always been painting for years and years and years. If you're a home do-it-yourselfer and you're painting, you got buckets of paint in your garage or in your storage shed. They've got dried on paint, and nobody's thought about it as really being a problem because you just normally accepted it. The key here is rank your ideas, the new ones to change the value chain, rank your ideas against your customers' unspoken needs. And how do you find out the unspoken needs? You need to go spend time with your customer. Whether that's a consumer or if you're in business to business, go work in your customer's business. Now, in a personal example, my father for many years was in the machine tool industry. He started off as an engineer and he went into sales. He spent 30 plus years of his career in the selling side of the machine tool industry. But every chance he got, he actually went and worked on the shop floor of his customers. He actually put on his jackets. He had this white lab jacket he used to always wear, and he'd go work a half a day on the shop floor, actually machining parts at his customers to really experience what his customers were doing with his products so that he could in turn feed that information back and get better products built for his customers. It's that kind of effort, going out and putting yourself in the shoes of your customers, observing them, not going through and asking them questions, but really being observant and truly understanding what it is your customers' problems are. And then you can rank your ideas about the unspoken needs, and then that gives you the real leg up. If you can find an idea that changes the value chain, addresses the unspoken need of your customer, you can create a breakout of that one-dimension innovation rut, and you can create that next killer innovation. Now, I really hate to beat a dead horse, but I just can't resist. Now that we've looked at how to break out of the one-dimensional innovation rut, apply what you just learned and answer the following 2 questions. What are the spoken and unspoken assumptions that your business or industry operates under? What are the spoken and unspoken assumptions that your business or industry operates under? And the next question, what is the default value chain your business or industry operates under? What is the default value chain your business or industry operates? And what do I mean by default value chain is if you're in an industry that's been around for 100 years, guess what? There's a value chain that's already been established. You sell your products to the middleman sells them to the retailer puts them on the shelf, sells them to the customer. Value chain is established. So document it. What is the default value chain for your business and or industry that you operate under? Then what are all the assumptions? What are the assumptions from the standpoint of how you operate your business and how your value chain works? And use what we just discussed to really change your business. Change your assumptions. Look at your business differently. Look at your value chain differently. And look for the areas that your competitors are not. And that's where you're going to find those breakout ideas that are really going to change your business, your career, and win against your competitors. This week, rather than a closing thought, I'm going to address another listener question. So this question came from Clay. It says, how do you find help with an idea? Now, in this case, in Clay's email, he goes through and he's come up with this idea. He's training for a marathon, or 2 marathons, I actually think, this summer that he's either done or is in the process of doing. He's come up with these ideas. He's come up with something. How do you validate it? How could he get help? Now, my first advice to this is be careful of the 4-fee companies. Companies that are out there, you see them on late night television here in the U.S., you see them on websites, they're offering you a fee to come in and evaluate your idea, and they'll market your idea, and they'll get you a license fee. You just got to pay X hundreds of dollars, or in some cases up to multiple thousands of dollars. Here's my advice on that. 90, 95, 99% of those companies are not worth the time. If your idea is truly a breakout, you're going to have more than enough people interested in it who will do it for free and put the compensation on the money that you actually receive. That's how your test is on whether or not your idea is really good. If you've got to pay somebody to go out and market your idea versus you've got somebody who's so enthusiastic that's going to go out there and market the idea and he's going to take just a percentage of cash you actually received, which is better validation? So be careful of the 4-fee consulting companies. They're just not worth the dollars. Secondly, I get a lot of requests, and even in Clay's email, he's asking if I could help. Well, in reality, I just can't. My day job is all-consuming, and not to mention the time that I have to put into producing the podcast. However, I do reply to emails, and I try to be as helpful as possible. So if you've got a good idea, and you're looking for just some quick validation or some quick feedback or some quick thoughts, please keep the email short, and I'll do my best to reply. Now, sometimes the email volume gets a little overwhelming, and I can't do individual replies, but I'll try to do my best. The most important advice I can give you is find a mentor you trust. Find somebody in your area, a leader, somebody that's been written about in your local newspaper, somebody who's had a success, where they've taken an idea and they've gone through the entire process. Because even my advice may apply for, in most cases, high-tech companies located in the U.S. I'm not going to have the knowledge about what works in the countries or regions that you are operating under. So find a local mentor. Find somebody locally who's had a success. Talk to lawyers who can turn you on to or make an introduction for you to companies or individuals who've been successful in going from an idea, working it through the entire process, whether that's raising venture capital or whether that's getting some other kinds of support. And then just go out and talk to those people. I get these emails all the time from people here local in California or all over the U.S. or even overseas while I'm traveling about, will I sit down and meet with them? And in fact, last week when I was in New York, actually I guess that was 2 weeks ago now, when I was in New York, I actually met with one of the podcast listeners in New York at a Starbucks across the street from my hotel on a Friday morning, and he pitched me an idea, and I gave him the feedback over a cup of coffee. So find leaders, people who've been successful, who've gone through the process, typically are more than willing to share with you their lessons learned. They're willing to pay it forward and share what the pain and struggles and help guide you through the process. What holds up most people is asking for the help. Reaching out, sending somebody an email, making the phone call. Don't be scared. the worst you can get is someone's going to be a jerk and say no, okay? But reach out and ask. People who are local, people who live in the same town as you, live in the same country as you, who've gone through and who've learned the process of bringing innovations to market in your region, reach out to them because that's the best knowledge that you can get. The other option you've got is go straight to the customer to validate your idea. Build a prototype, even if it's just something out of paper and scotch tape. Put something together and just put it in front of the customer. That will give you the comfort feel on whether or not your idea is really going to turn into something that's significant. That truly is going to result in something that is going to be the market's really going to adopt. So again, when you're looking for help, you've come up with that killer idea. 1, be careful of those 4-fee companies. 2, send me an email. I'll try to do my best, but don't rely on me as being the best source of information. 3rd, the best option for you is to find a local mentor. Find somebody you can trust. Get a referral from an attorney, from an accountant, a business leader in the city you live in the country you live in. Find somebody who's been in your region, who has been successful, and contact them. Don't be nervous. Don't be, concerned. Oh my God, this person's written up in the paper. He's famous or whatever. Ignore that. Reach out. Ask for help. What I've found in 99% of the cases, those people will respond and they're more than willing to give you a little bit of their time. Be respectful of their time. Keep the email short. Keep the discussion short. Keep the meeting short. But get their validation, get their input, and get their advice. Local advice is always best. And the last option is not, I wouldn't say last as your final option, but the option you should definitely do, even if you do any of the above, is go straight to your customer and validate your idea. Put the idea in front of a customer, even in its crudest form, and get the feedback from the people who will actually be buying and using your product or services. And if you follow this, you're going to have a much better chance of taking what your idea is and translating that into an innovation that actually sells well and is a success. Thanks for listening to this week's podcast. Email your feedback and questions to podcast@killerinnovations.com. Also, feel free to post your comments on the blog or on the podcast show notes or under Facebook. You can visit the Killer Innovation group in Facebook. Just go to Facebook and search for Killer Innovations and it'll come up. Also, feel free to connect our networks. I'm on Facebook. I'm also on LinkedIn. Send me an invite to podcast@killerinnovations.com or send me a friend request under Facebook. Please, please, please tell me that you're a listener of the podcast. I get lots of requests. I decline most of them, so if you sent me one in the past and I did not accept it, do not take offense. You may not have made it clear that you're a listener to the podcast, and just because of the sheer volume, I decline those that are not clearly marked as a listener to the podcast. So please, if you want to connect up, you want to connect our networks, whether that be on Facebook or whether that be on LinkedIn, send me an invite, but please let me know that you are a listener. Also, don't forget to vote for your favorite podcast over at Podcast Alley, over at Dig. It's the easiest way to say thanks to the producers of your favorite podcast that you really appreciate the time and personal effort they put into producing the podcast. Also, it's an easier way to let others know what you're listening to. Also, don't forget to visit the sites. You can read my blog at philmckinney.com. I'm going to try to get a little bit more regular on posting to the blog. Also, you can keep track of the podcast and the show notes and any messages I post about the podcast on over at thekillerinnovations.com. Back to the blog, I just posted 2 recent posts with regards to an innovation that I just released into the market. It's been something that I've been working on for 18 months as part of my team and my day job. So if you're interested in a little bit of behind-the-scenes look on bringing innovations to market, I would encourage you to go over to philmckinney.com and read the blog entries. Thanks again for taking the time out of your busy schedule to listen to the podcast. I know it takes time to download them, load them onto your MP3 player and listen to them. I truly appreciate the time. I truly appreciate those of you who have sent me comments and feedback and questions and emails of encouragement. I love doing the podcast, and your feedback and your comments and your kind notes are just fuel for the fire. And again, thanks again. We'll talk to you real soon. Bye-bye.